Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Dungeon Masters or Game Masters are what make or break a tabletop RPG. They spend time to craft a world full of quests and NPCs for us players to interact with, and should be applauded for their commitment in creating these things for everyone at the table to enjoy. Though, sometimes, there can be DMs that just take things a little too far in certain aspects. Whether it be overly strict rules, or putting players in really inappropriate situations. Much like the examples in these next D&D horror stories. So let's get right into the... Oh no, he found me. I thought I covered my tracks. It's the algorithm dragon. I need to power my shield so he can't get me. But the only way they are powered is with likes and comments. So I need your help. Like and share the video with your friends so they can like it too. That way, I don't become dragon kibble. Though, in the meantime, let's pass the time with these stories. Asshole DM and the Kingdom of Assholes by Reddit user NoCloud7275. I was playing in an online 5e game that was advertised as having a focus on realism. The DM and party seemed nice, and in our session 0, the DM said that he was going for a more realistic game, but that no classes or races would be restricted. He said he did have a few homebrew rules, but that he would get to them when they came up, as he wanted us to discover them organically. The game starts with the party arriving in a town in search of work. Things immediately got off to a bad start, as we came to understand what realism meant to this DM. For starters, every, and I mean every, NPC was not only gleefully described by the DM as being covered in mud and shit, but were also all assholes to the party for no reason. A common exchange when we tried to purchase something went like this. Merchant: what do you want arrows for, killer? Ranger: to, kill things. That's what arrows are for. Why are you selling them if they're so bad? Merchant: I don't need to explain myself to you. Apart from that, we also saw the welcoming sight of a young girl being burned at the stake for the crime of practicing magic. It turned out, magic was illegal in this kingdom, which the DM just so happened to omit. After spending an hour looking for any sort of plot hook from the stonewalling NPCs, we eventually find out there's an abandoned mine nearby that was taken over by goblins. We figure that maybe these villagers are hostile to outsiders out of fear and figured reclaiming their mine might make them more amicable to us. We joked that maybe it would make everyone stop being an asshole, to which the DM replied that not everyone was like that. So, in our first encounter with the goblins, the DM reveals his custom injuries tables. See, most lasting wounds tables apply effects on a crit. This DM, however, not only had almost every critical hit result in a dismemberment of some sort, but even just being hit would give the player character a 50% chance of the wound getting infected and them dying within a couple of days, unless the wound was treated immediately, which was exceedingly difficult because, again, healing magic was illegal. We somehow managed to kill the goblins, with our paladin losing a hand in the process and going unconscious, and we make off with a meager amount of loot the goblins had accrued. As soon as we exit the mine, however, the entire town's villagers are present as well, as the local lord and his knights demand that we give him the gold we just looted, stating that we stole it. We're all tired of these asshole NPCs at this point, so we refuse. Combat ensues, with the DM snickering that, quote, "It sure would be useful to use your spells right about now," as our wizard and druid had been stuck up until this point, using their starting weapons to try and do at least something. They didn't take the bait and kept up their subpar actions. Somehow, we managed to crit this lord twice and cut off both of his legs, to which this lord not only doesn't have to make any con saves, but just calls the party outlaws and criminals and gallops away, legless. When we complained about this, the DM says, quote, "He's a trained warrior from birth. He can withstand wounds." Again, he got both of his legs cut off. The peasant mob disperses after we give them all of our money, and the party collectively decide to leave this kingdom, saying that everyone was an asshole, to which the DM again protests that not everyone was, even though we had only ever interacted with jerks. After the DM tries everything to get us to stay in this land, saying there's bandits on the road, we wouldn't know anything about the surrounding area, our characters would want to stay. The DM finally relents as we just pick a random direction and start walking. The session ends, and 2 days later, the DM says on the party server that he decided it would be most realistic for the party to have caught and died from the flu while traveling across country, and to have died, and for us to roll new characters. We all tell the DM to go fuck himself, and he pastes paragraphs of text telling us that we were bad players for not appreciating and understanding, quote, how things really were back then. We all left as the DM was midway through his diatribe. TLDR, DM thinks realism equates to mudcore and everyone being assholes. Now, I could be down for a more realistic game of D&D, and even the part about magic being illegal could be pretty cool, narratively. Hell, one of the games I'm in involves a city where magic use is illegal unless you're part of a certain organization, and has led to pretty cool story beats. For example, my bard once used hideous laughter on a man that wanted us to kill cats, and I'm sure y'all can understand why I did that. Though, this DM took it to a weird place, where everyone was an asshole, and they even killed a girl for using just one spell. I can understand wanting to leave this game, as I would have too. Though, I do have to say that the way they did was a little obtuse, by straight up telling the DM to, quote, go fuck himself. They should have just told the DM that it wasn't the game for them, and explained why, and leave it at that. Instead, now the DM probably doesn't think he did anything wrong, and that these players were just assholes. So, in my opinion, there's no real good guy here. Though, what do you guys think? Let's move on to the next story. Make me Mother Mary? Okay, but I'm not going the way you want. By Reddit user, Kayutoko. Okay, so this was a very long time ago. Think 2004 or 2005. So the details are hazy at best, but I'll try to tell it as best I can. But this was my very first time playing with a new group, as I had just finished my first year of college and I was in a new place. I rolled a brand new 3.0 character, a half-elf fighter if you must ask. Very young, however. I think the starting age of 20. You know, cause I was approximately the same age. I am the only female character in the group, and no, this isn't going the way of, you're a girl, you should play healer, cause we had a better and more experienced healer already. However, the DM got weird in the second or third session. He had some evil wizard, or deity, wave his hands at me in particular. I found out at the end of that session, quote, oh, by the way, you're pregnant. And almost everyone stopped to go, wait, what the fuck? And he just sort of shrugged and went, quote, magic and whatnot. No one seemed to have more of a problem with it other than, quote, well, that was unexpected. And I was just like, what? A few more sessions go by, and I guess we burned through his campaign faster than he thought we would, because I was just in the second trimester by that time. So we came to the big bad, and he had me fall to my knees and clutch my stomach. In an instant, my baby bump vanished, and standing in front of us was a woman that, quote, looks like you with elements of that wizard you saw before, only she's brandishing a weapon and threatening us. So the DM looks at me, cockily, and does that, quote, so what do you do? Thing we all know and love. And I say, quote, well, I draw my greatsword and attack, seeing as this wasn't a child I wanted or even birthed, or could even prove was mine. He was not amused, and told me to roll. So after some presumably bad rolls on his end, and a few decent on mine, I eventually landed a critical hit. While the other 4 party members stood and watched, I basically decapitated my own daughter and upset the DM to the point of being red-faced, and he said, quote, "Well, that's it. The session is done," and started packing up his screen and dice, and everyone was looking at me like, "What the fuck is wrong with you?" Let's just say those few sessions were the only ones I played with that group. TLDR, force a strange Virgin Mary scenario on me and I will not hesitate to kill the spawn. I can hear everyone thinking, why didn't you stop it right away? And honestly, I don't know. I was young, stupid, and had the pathological need for people to like me. Plus, I only had been playing a year or two and didn't know this sort of thing was definitely not normal. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. I don't know why, but this is like the 10th story I've seen where a DM takes the only female in a group and makes them magically pregnant for plot reasons. I mean, I suppose it could be a decent plot hook if done right, though to force it on a player like that is kind of creepy and cringy, and only takes the character agency away. I do, however, kind of find it funny how OP said, "Fuck this shit," and killed the evil magic baby without a second thought though. Though I am curious how you would, dear viewers, have handled the situation. Be sure to let us know in the comments. Let's get to the next story. A one-shot party is underleveled for a combat encounter, so they use the power of teamwork to push their underage cleric into prostitution. By Reddit user Drakiana. This happened about 4 years ago. I made a post over at our DnD a few days after it happened, looking for some support, but I thought some of you here would get a kick out of the story. I have been trying to play D&D for some time, but couldn't seem to pin down a group to play with until a group of guys I went to school with organized a one-shot. I created an ASMR and made her 15 years old for the express purpose of playing her as a manipulative teenager who's more capable than she first appears. Think Hit Girl if she were a fallen angel cleric. Half the session time was spent on some shenanigans with a deck of many things that came to a literal dead end, so the DM just retconned that and we restarted. He then said we were underprepared for the fight he had actually intended for us, and that we needed to buy magic items, or we'd have no hope of getting through combat. I guess he didn't have time to alter the enemy stats or level us up to compensate, perhaps because of the time wasted on the aforementioned deck shenanigans, so he proceeded to give us the chance to earn some gold. First off was a betting ring. Nothing unusual there, though we didn't earn too much off that. Our characters then needed to get beds for the night, and the DM directed us towards an inn that also functioned as a brothel. Yes, this is unfortunately going where you think it's going. The owner tells my character that there's a brothel patron interested in how exotic and young she is, offering a shitload of gold for sex with her. I remember thinking that meant we as a party could go steal the gold from the patron, safe in the knowledge that he was an awful human being who didn't deserve to have it. But what followed was 20 minutes of the 4 men at the table pushing me to say yes, ignoring me when I said that I didn't want my 15-year-old character to do that, and the DM flicking through the magic items in the DM's guide to tell us what we could afford if I agreed. Also, the party members with gold refused to pay for my cleric's lodgings in the event that I said no, so she would be sleeping with a pedo or sleeping outside. No one was acting in character, and they were using my actual name the whole time. It was almost like I myself was being pressured into sex with a rich pervert, and the concept of that was funny to them. I felt vulnerable, and I just wanted out of the situation. So, I said yes. The end of my suffering, I thought. There would be a fade to black, we would get our gold, and I could move on. Instead, the DM gave a detailed physical description of the rapist my character was being abused by. Told me she had contracted chlamydia from the exchange, and that her ASMR spirit guide had abandoned her for being a whore. Sure, why not rub salt, acid, and manure in the wound? I had acquiesced to the deal though, so I had the shitload of gold that was promised. With it, I bought my undeserving fellow party members those magic items we so sorely needed. I should have told them to go fuck themselves and kept it all, but I was way too nice and didn't want to get into the way of anyone's fun. Though I did buy myself a 9-live Stealer sword, because if anyone should get a cool sword out of that horrible fuckery, it should be me. We finally got into combat with an Aeneas, and unluckily for me, I didn't roll any natural 20s against it, so I didn't get to use the sword's main feature. Nearly everyone else was getting 20s though. One player, the guy who had been the most callous and awful during the peer pressure debacle, had the gall to repeatedly say that someone else should get the sword, since it was wasted on me. When I snapped back that I would be keeping it, he said I should chill, and the rotten cherry on top of this shit-filled sundae is that I was the only one who had died to the Aeneas, with a double crit no less. It was like Lady Luck herself had decided to come and piss on my parade. Mercifully, this meant the session was soon over, and I had never subjected myself to playing with that group again. To take a quote from the OG post I made, my role in the game seemed to be to whore my character out, buy everyone cool equipment, and fuck off to let the big boys have their fun. I have no better words to sum up the whole experience than that. This is one of those stories that just makes you sit back and whisper into the air. What the fuck was that? The DM should have never had prostitution even be a thing if it was never agreed upon in the Session 0, let alone make it happen to a young character like that. And OP's original thought of trying to steal the gold should have been the plan the party went with, but instead, they too also turned out to be perverts. Not to mention the DM going into detail of the events that unfolded when OP relented. Glad to hear that OP no longer plays with this group, as I would have left after hearing something like that as well. Have you ever had a DM or other player try to pull perverted actions in a game? If so, how did you handle it? Let's move on to the last story. The DM asked for 8 players, decides to cut the group down to 5 via Hunger Games, by Reddit user Ruin Queen of Oblivion. Well, I'm a longtime viewer of the likes of Crit Crab and Crispy's Tavern. I hope one of these days I make it into a list of examples like that. I had hoped I would never actually have to post here, but I've got a short story of what happened just a couple weeks ago. The important players. Me, the DM, Friend 1, and Friend 2. There were more involved, but these are the most important people in this. So, last week, I had to leave a campaign I had joined a while back, which had a minor horror story of its own, but it's not my place to tell that one. After realizing that I was no longer really having fun with it, as that story didn't end in a bad way, I'm not going to go into that particular story. So after that, I started searching for a new campaign to join, as I'm a DM and wanted to be able to play in a campaign outside of my main group. And I thought I could find one through Mr. Ripper's Discord channel. The DM was offering a campaign that sounded interesting enough, but the details are not important as I never made it that far. I chatted with the DM a bit before joining things up, and he welcomed me to the campaign, gave some basic rules, including no flying races, which I wasn't a huge fan of, but I considered it minor at best, since I don't even play flying characters, as I prefer elves. The DM also started that call brushing his teeth, which, given he started it, seemed a bit odd, but again, not the point. So once I joined the Discord and we all got together on a call, we started talking with one another about our plans. The DM basically opened it up to any homebrew we wanted, and I had gotten the PDF of Tal'Dorei Setting Guide Reborn, so I was thinking about trying one of the new subclasses from that. Once the call was over, I started thinking about what I was going to play, leaning towards the Blood Mage subclass, and that's when it happened. So, in the advertisement, the DM asked for 8 people for the campaign. A bit high, but nothing a good DM can't handle. So, as we got settled in, the DM drops this particular bombshell on us. He wanted to cut the group down to 5, by having a battle royale between 8 level 1 characters. Now, one thing you have to understand about me, I like casters and ranged fighters. It's become my niche to play in, and he knew this. So Friend 1 protested this decision, as did more members of the group, and I did as well. It was not a good start to a campaign, and sent up a red flag for obvious reasons. The DM said he would figure something out, and then said no hard feelings towards anyone that got kicked. And then me and Friend 1 got kicked with no explanation. Friend 1 thought that the campaign had just fallen apart, but Friend 2, who was not kicked, told me that he had kicked a few people, so Friend 2 left, while giving the DM the middle finger. Not the most mature of reactions, but I would have done the same. Luckily, this has a happy ending. Friend 2, as it turned out, had his own campaign based around Norse mythology that he invited me to join. I had to play a melee-based character to fit what the group needed, but I got what I wanted in the original campaign, as Friend 2 let me use Matt Mercer's Path of the Juggernaut subclass. I've had a lot of fun with the character so far, and look forward to playing her more in the future. TLDR, DM invites too many people, and instead of telling some people that they can't play, decides to hold a battle royale between level 1 characters. I mean, that sounds like it could be a pretty fun idea, but with level 1 characters, really unbalanced. Though, to bring this up right before the campaign is set to start is kinda out of left field. I would've just noped out right then and there, and looked for a different game. But the way DM talked, it sounded like he was going to figure something out, and just let a few players know that they couldn't play. Then to just kick players out without any words at all is also shitty. I would say that OP and his friends probably would have had a bigger and longer horror story if they had stayed in this DM's campaign. Have you ever had a DM that left a lot to be desired? Or a DM that put things in a game that made everyone uncomfortable? If so, feel free to vent about it in the comments. If you have a story that you would like to be read by a Doge, be sure to post it in the comments, on the channel subreddit, or even just at me on Twitter. As always, I appreciate all of you, and I hope to get enough likes on this video to repel this dragon. Until next time.